What's up everybody, I'm Adam, you're watching Model Aviator, and this week we have the E Flite 1.2 meter F4U-4 Corsair. This airplane is provided to us by our good buddy Scott Elmore once again. He hands us an airplane brand new in the box for us to review for you, so Scott, thank you so much. The story of why Scott wanted this airplane in particular is a very interesting one. His father flew these in Korea. Let's take a look. Lowell Elmore joined the Navy in 1944. He would serve proudly until 1978, where he'd retire at the rank of captain. He soloed in 1946 and would work as a naval aviator until 1969. He flew 12 types of aircraft, famous airplanes like Corsairs, Hellcats, Skyraiders, jets like the Fury and the Skyhawk. May 18, 1951, he was serving with VF-24 Flying Corsairs in Korea when he was shot down by anti-aircraft fire while making a strafing run on half-tracks that were stolen by the Chinese, and they were coming across the Korean border to actually use them against them. Because he was shot down right there at the border, a helicopter was able to pick him up, and other than some burns, he survived. Interesting part of the story is his wingman said that Ensign Elmore almost went between the blades of his prop. He was following him so tight when he bailed out. Pretty cool story. In spite of the fact that he was actually shot down on a Corsair, the Corsair remained Lowell's favorite airplane that he flew in the Navy. He had 768 hours in them, a lot of those combat hours, and it's understandable why Scott would want to add a Corsair to his collection and get one in his hangar, and why it's so special to him. And Scott's father is still around, and I've got it on good authority that he'll be watching this episode with Scott. So on behalf of Heidi and myself and the Model Aviator channel, we'd like to say, Captain Elmore, we don't think heroes wear capes. We think they wear dog tags, and you, sir, are a true American hero. We appreciate your service to your country and the freedoms that you provided for us. God bless you, sir. We've seen a 1.2 meter Corsair from E Flite before. They released this mold several years ago with a different paint scheme. Had some different electronics. It was a 3-cell airplane then. They have since made quite a few improvements to this new version, one being the new paint scheme. The first one, I wasn't too crazy about the green stripe trainer paint scheme that it came with. I love the fact that with the new one, it's got stars and bars, and that's it. You get a set of decals or decals, depending on where you're from. You can do the Navy or Marine Corps with the decals that it comes with, or you can outsource them to Cali Graphics or some resource like that and do whatever squadron from the Navy or the Marine Corps that you want. And I think that's pretty cool. The other thing they've done is they've incorporated what they're putting in everything now, which is their smart technology. This has the Avian 70 amp speed control, so you get a lot of telemetry options as well as 4-cell compatibility, so this airplane has the potential, if you run it on 4-cell, you can do 3 or 4, to be a much more powerful airplane than the original version, and that is definitely an improvement. Of course, it does have AS3X and SAFE, and you do have the option of binding it so that you can either utilize SAFE or just use AS3X. When we pulled it out of the box, it was pretty typical of most airplanes nowadays. I think companies have got it figured out, and certainly Horizon is no exception. It was packaged very, very well. All of the parts were in very, very good condition, and there aren't many. You install the prop, you install the wing, and you install the horizontal. It only takes 5 bolts. All 5 bolts are exactly the same, so you can't get anything mixed up. You need 4 to install the wing and 1 to install the horizontal. All of the control surfaces are already hooked up. The push rods are already hooked up, other than the push rod to the horizontal, which you have to put the clevis on the control horn yourself. There are quick connects on the servos for rudder and elevator so that you can easily adjust that, or you can adjust it at the clevis, whichever you prefer. I will say this, most of the control surfaces were exactly where they needed to be. I believe I had to mechanically adjust one of the ailerons to get it perfectly straight. The flaps were set, the rudder was set, and one of the ailerons was set. So you may have to watch for that, but it's pretty much a no-brainer putting this airplane together. It's so easy. Even your drop tanks just slide in and slide out. Super, super easy. I don't typically like to fly airplanes with any kind of ordnance. I kind of like them clean, but we flew this both ways, and you'll see some footage with it both ways in the flying. We just wanted to do something different. I did notice there is a slight difference in trim elevator wise. When you put the drop tanks on, you need a little bit of up trim, which makes sense. A little bit of drag underneath. You kind of figure that. My first impression of the airplane once we got it together was that I absolutely love Corsairs. I totally understand why an airplane this size incorporates 90-degree rotating retracts, which is really nice. They've got super cool looking, very scale wheels with even scale tread, kind of a diamond pattern, tread pattern. So the main gear look good, they work good. It does not have a retractable tail wheel, and that makes sense. Most airplanes this size don't. It's a little bit more weight than they tend to add to these airplanes this size, and it would just be an extra expense that would raise the price. I love the fact that the flaps are scale. You see a lot of Corsairs that have come out in the past where they don't incorporate the scale flaps. They either will do outboard flaps and leave the inboard off or some goofy thing like that. So I do like the fact that the flaps are scale and they look good. They could have painted the inside part of the flaps, but if that bothers you, you can do that. But the assembly and the setup, pretty much a no-brainer. The instructions are very, very good. You will not have a problem getting this airplane together if you built a foamy or two for sure. Well, we've got this beauty together. Now it's time to show you the flying footage. You're going to see a little bit of the Maiden. We'll show you the Maiden takeoff and Maiden landing, so you can see our firsts for both those, and you'll see the stall test, both clean and dirty with the gear and flaps down. Interesting. Check that out. Right after that little bit of Maiden footage, you're going to see some flying where I'm just basically doing scale warbird aerobatics. That's pretty much what I like to do with a warbird. This airplane has enough power and enough throw, if you dial the throw up, to do much, much more. That's just not what I typically like to do with a warbird. Nothing wrong with throwing these things around if you want to. It's just not what I like to do with them. We did depart from scale for a couple things that you'll see, but most of it is just scale warbird flying. So check this out. The setup page is going to come right before the flying footage, and then we'll meet you back here for the sum up. One thing that I want to note right away, before you see the setup page, you'll see we flew it on 2200 packs. We got a single morning where the weather was good enough and we actually had time to get this thing out. We had about an hour and a half window to work with, so not a lot of time. Flew it 4 times and ended up with my timer set to about 4 minutes just to be conservative. I could have eked out maybe 4.5 depending on how I was flying and what I was doing. Remember, most of my flying was scale, and 4.5 would be the maximum you'll get with a 2200. There's room in the cabinet's battery bay, as you can see here, to put a 3200 or 33. I would suggest that a 32 or 3300 4-cell be what you go with if you want any kind of flight time out of this thing. It's pretty tough on the packs. So check out the flying footage and we'll see you back here and sum it up. We put this little bit of taxiing in just to show you how tight the Corsair can turn on the ground. That's good and bad. That might lend to the ground handling being a little squirrely. You'll notice on that maiden takeoff I was a bit behind on the right rudder. Here we're doing the stall tests. This is clean. Little wing drop to the left, but not drastic at all, and a very easy recovery. We try it again, does the same thing again, and then we tried it twice, dirty with the gear down and flaps down, which you'll see next, and it drops that left wing ever so slightly every time. Very easy recovery either way. You'll notice here on our maiden landing, between the hard tail wheel, the very light tail, and the slippery geotextile, once the tail comes down, I can't hang on to it. Here's some footage featuring the Corsair with the drop tanks on. A little bit of a different look. Still flies really good. The takeoffs always look better when you're on time with the rudder. I was still a little bit behind on it there, but I caught up to it. From a scale flying and scale aerobatics perspective, I really couldn't tell much of a difference in the way the airplane flew with or without tanks. There was a tiny trim change on the elevator, but that was pretty much it. Here's our landing with the drop tanks on. This is one of the few times I was able to hang on to the tail, but the touchdown kind of sucked. For our clean flight without the drop tanks, we elected to use the grass this time for our takeoff and landing. Ground handling on the grass with the Corsair, as with any airplane, is much easier. The increase in power on this new version on 4-cell is obvious, although I used it subtly. The acceleration's brisk, and there's just more than you need for everything that you do, at least flying scale for sure. You can see keeping the tail under control on the landing rollout is much easier on grass. We've got a couple of bonus clips coming up for you. A little bit of non-scale goofing off. got one more landing here for you. Watch the rudder correction and you'll see on the geotextile, doesn't really matter. So as you saw, a little bit tricky in the ground handling department, at least on geotextile on the landing rollout. I think there are some things that could improve that in that particular situation. I think a softer rubber tail wheel that's got a little bit more grip would help. I think moving the CG back a bit and getting a little bit more weight towards the tail would help, but that's something that you have to have more time than we had to do. The airplane flies really, really good. If you're not concerned about doing the slow scale takeoffs and landings with a nice straight rollout down the center, then what I'm talking about really doesn't matter. If you're flying off grass, grass makes everything easier. It's not even a problem there, as you saw with our grass takeoffs and landings. It might not even be a problem on pavement. Pavement and concrete, a little bit more grip than on geotextile. Geo seems to be the slipperiest of surfaces that I've ever taken off from, and you see this particular issue with a lot of warbirds. It's not just this Corsair, quite a few do that, and if that's what you're going to be flying off of, you have to make some changes to address that. What kind of a pilot can fly this airplane? Well, it's definitely not a beginner's airplane. It requires a great deal of rudder skill and some tail dragger experience. I would say it'd be a good third airplane. If you're an intermediate pilot and you've flown something that's got, fairly sensitive controls and you've got some tail dragger experience, this would be a great airplane to move into as your first airplane with retractable gear and flaps, just so you get used to having to flip those switches. It's docile enough with the flaps down so that you could learn to handle an airplane with flaps with the Corsair, but I would never want one of my students to challenge themselves with all the things that this would challenge you with if you just went to it from a trainer, at least not personally. You'd be having to deal with first airplane with retracts, learning how to deal with flaps, learning how to handle a tail dragger on an airplane that, as tail draggers go, if you're doing scale stuff from a smooth surface, is much more of a challenge than many others you could learn on. It's just, yeah. It is not a beginner's airplane, to say the least. But it doesn't require super advanced skills. It would if they addressed the one thing that would be my particular complaint, and that is this tiny propeller. An F4U-4 Corsair has a gigantic propeller, as you can see here in this picture. On a lot of these warbirds, they use much higher kV motors and tiny props, and they do that for a reason. For me, I would want a low kV motor and a big scale prop. The reason they don't do that is because the larger the air screw that you go with, the more torque, the more spiraling slipstream, the more P factor, the more all the things that make the airplane in all kinds of situations want to go to the left. It increases that, and there's a much larger premium on really good rudder and throttle modulation skills. And that means that a narrower group of pilots are going to be capable of flying the airplane well, taking it off and landing it, handling go-arounds when you're putting the throttle to it from a really slow speed. It is something that they do with these tiny props to make these airplanes fit a broader spectrum of pilots. They can sell more airplanes if more people can fly them well, and that's why they do it. But that thing's just tiny. I wish it was bigger. Other than that, though, I don't really have any complaints. It's a great price point for what it is. I'm surprised, especially with the improvements, that it costs what it costs. I'm surprised it's not more. The fit and finish is really, really good. Great looking airplane. I love the fact that you have decal options and you can kind of do what you want with it. It's a big 2 thumbs up from Model AV8R. All the 1.2 meter warbirds from Horizon are really great flying airplanes. The fit and finish, I've flown them all. They're just all good. And this new and improved Corsair is just better than ever. So if you are interested in getting yourself one, we definitely recommend it. We will leave a link in the description where you can go straight to the page at Horizon Hobby and do just that. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Doesn't cost anything, and it really helps us out, helps support the channel. We appreciate it when you do that very much. Please join us next week. We'll have something else cool with wings. Take it easy.